What's up, everybody? Welcome to an episode of Game School Online, a show about bringing professional artists to talk about projects or personal projects in particular, and figuring out the techniques and the thinking behind it. This is the first time we're actually bringing back one of our scholars. I think this is the first time Tom has ever joined us. He's a lighting scholar. He's been at various companies, so before I butcher his resume, I'm going to bring him on here. And I'm going to unmute you real quick, Tom. Can you hear me?
Yeah, can you hear me?
All right. So I'm going to switch to your...
You hear me okay?
Yes. Everything's all good.
Cool.
So let's go ahead and get started.
I don't usually have a camera here, so...
No worries. Just ignore that thing. For the time being, do you mind kind of giving our viewers out there a little background of who you are and what you're doing and where you're heading and all that information?
So I started out in film and television, lighting. Actually, I started out as a character animator, but I've done modeling and texturing and all kinds of just about everything until I found lighting. And lighting was in such demand that I just continued in that stream with my career, and it got me pretty far. I actually got to work at places like Disney and DreamWorks, and then I switched over to games after about my fourth movie. I had my art director from Disney went to Naughty Dog, and he asked me if I wanted to come work there. So I ended up working at Naughty Dog for several years, and from there I went to Activision, and I went to DICE EA for a while, and then and I came back home to North Carolina with my wife, and then I worked at Epic Games for a few years, or a couple of years, not very long. But we wanted to live in the mountains, so I ended up being like a contractor for Epic Games and working from my home office here in western part of North Carolina, because Epic is in like the middle of the state in Cary, North Carolina. So and I still I work with them every once in a while and work on my own projects, and then do some freelance, really all over the place. But kind of semi-retired, honestly. After cashing out of Los Angeles and getting a few Call of Duty bonuses, decided to just move home. So. Yeah. I
mean, that's tremendous insight, man. Like knowing about lighting, because right now it's still I feel within the game industry, not a lot of people know that that's like a hot topic still. Effects and lighting are like the two hottest jobs right now in the industry that not everyone's very privy to still. Yeah. But you were able to see that years ago. Yeah. What were the signs?
It's back when they used to do SIGGRAPH used to have. But that's where you went to get jobs in the film industries, like SIGGRAPH. You brought your reel, and I noticed it was actually at Disney. When I was at Disney, I was like talking to the guys there. This was when I worked as an animator for on a PBS show out of Minnesota. I was in Minnesota, and I was talking to the Disney guys because I always wanted to work there. And they had lines, at different sections of their career booth. And I noticed that like the animation line, which I of course got in and like waited forever. But the interesting thing was I was kind of looking at the other lines, one of them being lighting, and one of them being, I always remember like lighting had like basically no people, somebody would walk up every once in a while and talk to them about lighting. And then the shader guy, they were looking for people to write shaders for RenderMan, and there was nobody. I literally remember that guy standing up and being like, is anyone interested in learning how to make shaders for like RenderMan shaders? And you start realizing, oh man, there's a whole section of the industry that they don't have enough people for. Mm-hmm. And here we all are wanting to be modelers and animators and like the typical things that we think of in our head. And I had done some lighting on this PBS show. That's kind of how I got started. I was a modeler, and I was an animator, but I had to help the modeling team catch up. And so I was modeling things, and I would submit them with kind of pretty lighting. And they were saying, "Hey, why do your stuff looks better than some of these other stuff?" And I'm like, it's not the model. It's not better. It's just that I'm presenting it well. Mm-hmm. And so they asked me to light a few shots, and the next thing you know, they were asking me, "Hey, do you want to do a big section of this show?" Mm-hmm. So So I did. And then I got a small lighting reel together, and I'd used Jimmy Neutron. This is back when Jimmy Neutron the movie had come out, and I was using Jimmy Neutron as reference because it was very well put together color-wise. They used a lot of good color theory, and so using Jimmy Neutron as reference to this show called Ought to Be Good, I put together a little demo reel, and the next thing you know, DNA, the guys that made Jimmy Neutron, were interested in hiring me to work on Jimmy Neutron, which totally makes sense. Of course, I'm using all their stuff as reference. So, and that was kind of my bigger break because I was working on little shows that nobody knew, and then suddenly you work on a show that everybody at that time they were like the number 2 kids show behind SpongeBob. So it was a pretty big show, and everybody knew what it was at that point. So that gave me that foot in the door of bigger places like Disney. You kind of almost have to have that known on your reel and work at a place for a few years of a known project that does good art. But so I got really lucky there.
You say luck, man, but everything I'm hearing is like you're putting yourself in positions for like great opportunities. Just having the ability to recognize that the lines are separate and there's like a lesser amount of people interested in like this potential huge part of the industry, which is lighting and effects, right? Lighting in particular in this case.
Yeah.
Not a lot of people just miss that, or at least they see it, but they don't acknowledge it enough to be like, I just love modeling and animation, which most of us fall in the trap of.
Yeah, it kind of depends on what your desire is in the sense of, I guess if I was so passionate about being a character animator that I could not see anything else, then I would have pursued that field. But what I realized is my career would be limited. I might have been able to work on some TV shows or something, but I realized when I switched to lighting that the sky was the limit because it was just, it was in crazy demand. It still is. I think the last the last LinkedIn post I got for positions needed it was like 7 lighting positions.
Yep.
And they were all like Blizzard and Activision and not little companies, like giant, good jobs.
Right.
They're still just killing for lighters, which is great. I don't think I would have made it to Disney as an animator. I don't think I was that talented, honestly. I liked it.
Yeah.
Man, it's hard because you compete with such amazing people. So
yeah,
maybe I would have worked my way up there. It'd have been a long road, but lighting, it felt like it happened pretty fast within a few years.
Yeah. I think similar to what the visual effects companies and movie companies went through, where a lighting department was its own thing. That's just happening with the game industry, where lighting departments are not all the environment art responsibility anymore. It's becoming its own thing, and that's very new within the game industry. So it's a huge,
and
huge
that was
field.
another stroke of luck for me, because it was when my AD asked me to come to Naughty Dog, I didn't know who they were. I didn't really, like, I'd played their games, but I didn't even own a PlayStation 3, so I didn't know about Uncharted, the first Uncharted. So I came on Uncharted 2, not realizing how famous of a company they were. And it immediately set me up. Not only that we really improved the visuals, creating a lighting department. And people saw that. The other game companies saw that, like, hey, Uncharted just made a leap in quality. And they started asking questions. And of course, the lighting team grew, and they got better people. And the next thing you know, I could tell that I was kind of in that sweet spot again, where other companies were trying to headhunt me out of Naughty Dog. So it was kind of interesting. I didn't realize it would be that big of a deal working for them.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you were putting yourself in the right place at the right time. Technology at that moment, the generation consoles were getting better. Games as a tech is not something we laugh at anymore. So a lot of the movie stuff that we marvel at is we're able to do it now with ray tracing. So it's a natural progression. But you were right there, man. You saw light years before everyone else. No pun intended. So
it was crazy to see the change, and it doesn't seem like that long ago to me, because I started in, like, I don't know, 2007 or something in games, 2008 maybe. So 10 years we went from, like, if you look at Uncharted, PS3 Uncharted, and then you look at like the stuff that we do at Epic in real time, it's unbelievable, like unbelievable, how far this technology's come. It's been really neat to be a part of it, but it's already like, it's it's going to be interesting. I think it's only going to get, it's going to be, now you're competing with people from the film industry. Probably you're getting a lot of employees that are jumping back and forth,
right?
And that's going to be easy for people to do because
you're
already at that quality.
Yeah. Well, this is a perfect segue to the meat of today's show, which is again, you having the foresight of a little software that we all laughed about before, but now who's laughing now, right? Blender, right? Blender is something that I myself wasn't really taking seriously like 5 years ago, right? But in lieu of all
not many of us did.
Not many of us did. So can you kind of give us a little background on your Blender experience and why'd you turn into the program? Yeah.
It's strange. I got introduced to it at Naughty Dog, actually. So there was this guy. There's like two sections of Naughty Dog. The section where we make the games, and there's this other area called ICE. I'm not even sure if I'm supposed to talk about this stuff because it's so secretive. There's a Sony, a really high-end Sony programming section of Naughty Dog that makes makes software for the actual console, the like high-end guys, to the point where like I don't even have access as a senior artist. My key card won't get me into that part of the building. It's like top secret. Like you got to pull the book and the door case moves and it's a whole different. It's damn near that crazy. Right. So we always had like our ICE buddy, like this, a programming guy that we would try to help because they did need content a lot. So this guy would ask me for different things. His name was Mort Mickelson, and he would ask me for different assets, just little simple things. But the thing is, he was working through Blender, and the reason why he was using Blender is because it was open source, and he got access to the source code, and would in order to make the changes he needed to make to get this like super high end PlayStation 20, whatever the hell they're working on back there, thing to work. So I would build assets for him, pretty much kicking and screaming at the time in Blender. But the more I worked with it, the more I was kind of like, this software isn't that bad. It was open source, which I super appreciate that part. And I could see kind of where it was going. So I kept my eye on it. I certainly didn't use it at the time just to build him assets. But it was on my radar at that point. So I kind of kept my eye on it. And it wasn't until, it was probably after I left ImageWorks, where I started looking at it again. So I was at Activision. This is probably, I don't know, maybe 5 years ago. Mm-hmm. I really started taking notice that they had changed the interface, and there was these new plugins that were basically free. So, the other thing is Activision was trying to train me on 3D Studio Max. Mm-hmm. And I've always been kind of weird about Max. There's something about that software I just can't wrap my head around. I don't know why. And they weren't too picky about it. So me being a big Lightwave guy, Lightwave and Moto, because I'm so old school. That was like back when Lightwave, dominated the industry. And then Maya was never like, it was okay. I had no problem with Maya. But 3ds Max, I just couldn't, so they allowed me to kind of explore different software. And so I installed Blender again and started playing around with it. And next thing you know, I was making assets with Blender. Mm-hmm. So, and that was on Call of Duty Ghosts, I guess. And I was still using a lot of Lightwave too. So I'd sneak in the Lightwave when I could, and then in Blender. But it kind of really gave me that, much more gave me a feel for it. Mm-hmm. And so when I came here back to North Carolina, the little community college I teach at teaches Blender. So, and I was like, I pretty much know Blender. And it's funny how you really learn something when you start teaching it. Right. So once I started teaching Blender, I really started to learn it. And then I went to Epic Games and found out that there was a whole like group of people using Blender, which kind of blew my mind. Right. There was like a guy I used to work with at DreamWorks was there, and he was a hardcore Blender guy. The guy I used to work with at DNA and DreamWorks, a concept artist, would use it to block out things before he painted it. So we got to talking more and more, and there were several other guys. A guy came from ILM actually that was a huge Blender guy, and he would build all his assets, all the destruction and everything in Blender. So that's when, I don't know, it kind of felt more real that like a studio was using it. And since then, I've been telling people, hey, it's no joke. Like this is a real piece of software that people, and now that 2.8 came out, it's kind of exploded. Like it's on everybody's radar now, mainly because the viewport, the cool Eevee viewport renderer, and it's pretty robust. It still has its strange quirks, but I think it's well on its way to competing with some of the bigger pieces of software now. I don't have any reservations. Like it's not embarrassing to me to say, hey, I use Blender most of the time, which is absolutely true now. Yeah,
you're in the bleeding edge now.
Yeah, right.
It's a different story now. Yeah, I mean, it's a lot of kudos to the Blender team to kind of like get through all that laughter and noise that they've faced over the years, and
keep working at it.
And now it's a dominant force because, like the other software, like you mentioned, like I've been using Maya primarily a lot in professional career. I've started using Max at the very beginning of my career, but it's mostly been shifting to Maya in a lot of the studios. Yeah. But those two software.
And the strange thing is, a lot of people couldn't see that. Yeah. They didn't believe that like something could switch software wise. A lot of people were like, there's no way Maya just dominates the industry. But when I started in like the year 2000, 2001, Lightwave dominated the industry. Like everyone used Lightwave. So I saw this paradigm switch from Lightwave to Maya already. So it's totally possible. I know it can happen. There's, it just usually needs something to spark it. And I'm not saying that Blender's going to take over the industry. I'm just saying that it could happen. Like there's no, like when a lot of people are like, no, it couldn't, look at all these studios that use Maya. It's like, dude, those studios could swap software tomorrow. Yeah. Like it happens. I've seen it happen before. Yeah. I saw Disney go from RenderMan to, a proprietary renderer. It happens fast.
Yeah, it usually just happens on the ground floor with artists preferring a software over the other, and if there's enough of them, that creates the.
And pipeline. That's a big change in the industry. It used to be that you just used what they gave you, and now people are giving you a choice, which is kind of strange. So, and it's giving all the choices. It's kind of interesting that so many people are choosing Blender, and it's probably just because it's so available. It being open source,
so everybody's. Free. Yeah, it only makes sense that something like that would be creating the most users coming in the industry, right? I mean, it's
still got to be good. I think
it's still got to be good.
It's still got to be good. Yeah, but so props to them because you can't. Maya is still a damn nice piece of software. So when Blender's starting to take share away, it says a lot about that. Especially when it's it's free to me because I work at a studio. Who cares if it's Maya or whatever?
Yeah.
But it is pretty hassle free when you don't have licensing stuff or dongles. Right. Lightwave used to have dongles, like physical things you had to plug into the computer. Talk about a pain in the butt.
Yeah.
So.
Well, let's kind of go into today's show where you are gonna. I think I have your screen up, so I'm gonna go ahead and switch over to that. But you go ahead and take it away while we just talk over it, man. What are you going to show us today?
So this is of course Unreal Engine. So this is something that I put together This was like 10 guys. There's a Blender community. That's another kind of a cool thing about Blender is it's got this really neat community that everybody kind of shares, and I think that's part of the whole open source thing. They share not just assets and things like that, but information. Like people are just openly saying, "This is how I did this," and it's kind of fun that way. So this was created, even though this is Unreal. All this stuff was created in Blender by a group of us over on the Blender Discord. They do like a once every month or something. Or every few months they'll just pick a piece of concept art and just build it all. So let's go to the lit version of this. So basically, I just export it. It's really easy to do, just exporting FBXs and creating the scene and lighting it. And what's fun is, so this is the scene in Blender. Well, not the exact scene; it's the assets. And I put together another kind of my own version of the scene. This is the new Blender 2.8, which we're all getting used to still. This is like the preview unlit, but this is kind of where it gets powerful. This here is like, a lot of people would look at this and be like, oh, that's a pretty render, just like Unreal. But this is actually the viewport, the Blender viewport, which is, they call it Eevee. This is the new viewport renderer, which gives you a lot of everything from volumetric lighting to, blooms. And I mean, it's what's cool is when you look at the assets versus what they are in Unreal, they're almost exactly the same, including the materials. The materials are made with these BSDF principal shaders that really are the same thing. If you look at the shaders in Unreal, they're really the same. It's put together in the same process. And matter of fact, I've heard that they were talking a lot back and forth. In fact, this is the other thing that's strange about.
So Epic,
well, there's like
Epic gave $1 million to Blender, so obviously they're
right. But way before that, two years before that, they had this guy employed there that was writing this engine. So they're a little, might be a little more in bed than we think. Just not in bed, but you know what I mean. They're they're working together. Like I think
definitely.
Tim Sweeney really likes open source stuff, and I know that there's been a lot of talk about like how Blender can better serve Unreal and vice versa.
Well, it only helps,
so
right?
yeah, the guy, one of the software guys that did this engine was employed full time at Epic Games. So it's kind of interesting stuff. So and he's gone on to make, he still lives there in Cary, and he's gone on to do something else, but it is something to do with Blender. I wonder if I can.
Yeah, I would imagine it serves Epic in their best interest to work alongside another type of free software, so that it really removes all barriers for anybody who wants to make a game within Unreal Engine. And Blender, yeah, really. I mean,
that's the other thing, is it being free. Indies are, of course, all over this. And I always said, today's indies are tomorrow's big game companies, because that's just how it works. Somebody's going to hit something, and it's, and if they're a Blender house, then there you go. You got a bigger Blender shop. And I think the first feature animated movie in Blender came out this year, which was called
like Next Gen or something.
Next Gen, yeah, Next Gen. So if you look that up, it's not the greatest.
Awesome, yeah.
It looks amazing. It's not the greatest movie, because I don't know who wrote it or what the production is, but look wise, it's incredible.
It's there, yeah.
Considering, again, it's done with free software.
Well, I'm just very impressed how, can you do that switch back and forth again with Unreal? Like, how close it freaking looks, dude.
Yeah, and this isn't even me. Amazing. Like, this is a completely different lighting setup. Matter of fact, you notice these are blue instead of the warm color. So I'm bouncing around different colors really. But we have the same setup here. Like somewhere here in our settings, I think it's here. It might be in the. So there's like light caching or light baking is what it is. So we can do the same thing where we can set up our lights, and then I think that's here to see them. Yeah. So we can set up our lights just like we do in Unreal, and then we can bake them down. And then certain things are we don't have quite as much control in here. That's why I put all this stuff into Unreal Engine, because there's a few things that are kind of quirky, like although we do have volumetrics, I think I can turn this on here. So we do have volumetric lighting, However, it's not per light. It's like the scene. So it's a volumetric volume that goes over everything. And even though we can see it and it casts shadows and it's really nice, because I can't control it per light, like this light over here, that shouldn't have volume on it. And I can't turn that off. Whereas Unreal, of course, I can on a per light basis, I can grab something and make sure that its volumetric scatter is 1 or 0, and then that gives me, control over which lights are producing these God rays. So they're, and will that come? I have no idea. I don't. I think as it is, something that can get assets from an engine that you're modeling into a real-time render engine as powerful as Unreal. This is like as much as I would ever expect, like really more than I would expect. So for me, it's not that big a deal. It would be kind of nice if you could set this up perfectly, but then we would just start rendering everything in Blender. And speaking of rendering in Blender, there is a unbiased renderer, just like Arnold. As a matter of fact, the guy that wrote that renderer works for, and it seems so strange that this happens, but he works for, I guess it's now Autodesk because they purchased him, but he also writes the code for Arnold. So these renderers are very similar. And that is up here, I believe. We're still getting used to this. So where I change the engine to Eevee, I can actually change that. And it's like a one-click switch to the cycles, which is unbiased. And of course, it's going to take forever to render. But then you get like a pure, unbiased, perfect lighting scenario where, just like.
Oh, I think I just lost.
Did you?
Oh, all right.
Oh,
you're good.
You know why? Because I'm sitting here using all my processing power to exactly, to render something I shouldn't be. Yeah. So that's what I love about real time too. I mean, you can use, what am I using, like two threads maybe, 2 or 3 threads to run this whole thing.
Yeah.
So you switch to cycles. It's just like it's just like hitting Arnold render. It's going to go to town. But it does an amazing job, and you don't even have to change the shaders. The shaders work. You build a shader for Eevee, and it's the same shader for cycles. So
really?
It's amazing. Yeah. So if you do want to take like something that you've created and say, okay, now I want a perfect like promo shot that's really well lit. You just switch it over to the cycles renderer. Probably have to tweak some lighting for sure, but you'll be pretty darn close, I would imagine. And then you get it, up your samples up, just like Arnold. Just crank your samples and render it for half an hour, and you'll have a really nice image. But yeah, we even have like screen space reflection and all that kind of stuff. Same thing.
That's already a leg up for most. Like, I wouldn't even imagine setting up my scene within Maya or Autodesk or any Autodesk software at this point. Like, it just doesn't match up to what I would have in an in-game engine, which is pretty backwards, knowing that most of these guys who are using the software is for importing to a game engine, right? At least a good percentage. I'm not saying the visual effects artists don't.
It's so nice to be able to see something that is much closer to what you're going to get. Like there's something cool about that when you're building an object and you've set up your you can set up a scene that look just like using the Epic Games courtyard there as their HDR, and it looks basically just like if you do one of these things where you're looking at this has got to build a shader, but it's the same thing. You're using the same courtyard. You can place down a same mid-gray ground, and what you're looking at will be super close while you're modeling it, and you're looking at it, modeling it, looking at it, and then once you push that out, there's not nearly as much question about what you're doing. Like it's not nearly as much back and forth. So yeah.
Yeah.
And yeah,
I mean,
all
like,
these things were done in Blender.
yeah, I mean that's the main concern when a game developer, or especially a game artist, is working on a particular project, right? I remember every time I am working on something, it's like 5-6 programs open at the same time, a lot of back and forth through the modeling, through the texturing, through the lighting phase, through the importing, through the checking within Unreal or a game engine.
Yeah,
It's just like
and I still
all that time wasted.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, this is some cool to check out. So when you look at these, let me sometimes have such a hard time going back and forth from the two because their navigation is so different. So when you look at all the bump
do you mind
maps,
kind of talking about that? So this is a noob question. So Blender, the first time a few years ago when I opened it up and then I immediate close was because of the navigation. Has that remained the same for Blender?
So there's
there are changes,
preferences for that.
Okay.
So me being, again, they kind of with Lightwave being on the decline, they did. I think they did this thing on purpose where they have an input where you can emulate a 3-button mouse. And because I work with the tablet so much anyway, I have this checked on, and then I change the this zoom axis navigation to horizontal. And what it gives me is Lightwave's navigation. So I hold Alt to rotate, Alt Shift, and Alt Control. That's exactly like Lightwave. But they also have one for Maya. So if you wanted to navigate just like Maya. And then the thing that really freaked everyone out was the right-click select. It used to be a right-click to select things, which, believe it or not, I still use that because it sounds odd at first, but the thought behind it was one button selects and one button does things. And it got so second nature. And for some reason, that doesn't bother me. Like I can switch to another application and realize that every other application is left button select. That one doesn't get me. It's more the Maya style moving. And then so I'm completely different in Unreal. I never use the Maya style moving because it's like you're just so easily disoriented. So I always use the first person WASD with the right click. Yeah. So, and that's pretty different. Even if you're going from Maya to Unreal, that's pretty different. You're gonna always be like, oh, it's gonna take me a second just to be like, okay, wait, no, but yeah, there is some. And the thing about like 3D Studio Max is, to me, is really different, and it was the main reason I couldn't wrap my head around that. And somebody was telling me the reason why they make all this software, like there's not just one 3D package, is because people's brains work differently. So to me, 3D Studio Max is completely like mind-blowingly hard to learn, whereas other people are like, this is totally intuitive, and they're saying the opposite about Maya or Max or whatever, or Blender. So and that I kind of understand. I use the software that works for you, that just feels intuitive for you. You're just going to be able to. To me, ZBrush is like, that's like Alien wrote that software. Yeah. I just don't get it at all, and I've had to learn it several times where I'm like, why do they got to be so different? But I've heard that like if you are a traditional sculptor and you sit down with ZBrush, a lot of those guys just pick it up really quickly. So it is what it is. So one of the cool things is, so Blender has some sculpting tools that are like ZBrush, even with dynamic topology, where as you're sculpting, it'll create the topology for you. And so that's how I built like all this wood is actually sculpted. And then I just took, decimated it down to where it was real low poly, and then baked in the normal geometry, and it works great. Their baking works great. Like it's kind of there's a trick to it. Like you want to bake through an emissive channel. Sounds strange, but if you're doing like the different things, because we're baking to things like metal or or whatnot. So it feels a little bit odd, but once you get the hang of it, it's really nice. It really works well. So all this stuff is basically like this is all flat geometry that I've sculpted out and then baked on, and it comes out great. Yeah. So
it's looking cool, man. Like, it's so funny how times have changed. Right now we're looking at Blender experts because everyone is seeing the change. Everyone's seeing the benefit of free software dominating the market, and seeing the results especially is what's convincing everybody. It's like, this, I don't have an equivalent to Eevee like on other 3D applications to be able to,
which is kind of amazing. You're paying thousands of dollars, and we should. And they've been promising that for a long time. I think eventually it'll be like they
have to think about it now.
Maya will figure out how to connect directly with Unreal, where you're working over here in Maya and you're looking at it over here in Unreal Engine. That may be where they're going, because that would be the step even beyond this probably. But yeah, open source is a cool thing, because when I went from television to film, so the film industry is completely Linux. It's 100% Linux. There's no film company I know of that does not use Linux, including Pixar and Disney and DreamWorks. All those guys are completely your workstations, from the workstations to the render farms, everything is Linux. So we had to learn it. And again, it was a lot like Blender.
Yeah, what's the reasoning behind that? Is it just more malleable to code for or something?
Actually, I think the main reason, and this is my theory, I would have to ask like one of the guys, but so Windows sees files, because we're working with these frames, these huge 4K frames. Each one of them is its own image file. It's usually this giant EXR or something. Yeah. And Windows will, like, you have 3,000 frames, and Windows will say, okay, I got to move these 3,000 frames from here to here, and it'll go frame 1, move, frame 2, move. And Linux, from what I understand, will just go data, move. And it just works so much faster. So that's part of it, but also there's a security issue, of course, with Windows. And there's the ability to build in all these scripts that we can use, because we do a lot of bash scripting, and people will write those things for us. So anything that's anything you have to do more than once or a couple times a day, somebody's written a script and you just run it and it works. So it's a little bit faster. Matter of fact, when I went to Naughty Dog, it was so disorienting being back on Windows that they installed this thing called Cygwin onto my machine that basically allowed me to bash script in Windows, because I was so used to command lining everything, like anything. Open my files, just open, and it's like it's surprising how much faster that is, because you can tab complete anything, so you just type in a couple letters and tab complete, tab complete, and you're there, and then you hit run, and then I'm in Windows and I'm looking like looking at 1,000 icons, going, where is this? Like, which I'm just not used to. Even to this day, it's like you open up, these projects are huge. And even when you're looking in here, you get into these, these content folders will be full of stuff, and it's a visual thing where you're looking for it. So how many times do we now, jump up to this filter and type, right? Right. It's really the same thing. It's you're grepping for something in Linux. You're grepping right for it, and you get there and you run it, and it's almost instant. So there's quite a few benefits. I'm also a pretty big Linux fan. I'm super happy that both Unreal and Unity now run pretty damn well on Linux. Matter of fact, Unity announced that theirs is they're like official. Their Linux version is official, so which is kind of nice. Right. Hopefully, we'll get there with Unreal. Yeah. But I have on my downstairs laptop runs Linux, and I've compiled Unreal like 4.2 or something, and it's fast. That's the other thing is like when you work especially on one of these big workstations, if you dual boot like Linux and Windows, you'll see the difference. You'll probably see why people use Linux. It's so much faster. It's damn near when your finger releases the button, like your software is up and it's running. It's like it's shocking to see that and realize that there's so much overhead to Windows that it slows everything down. And it doesn't seem like, a few milliseconds might not seem like a lot, but as you're working through things, it gets pretty crazy.
Yeah, all that spyware and location base.
Who knows? I don't
monitoring. Linux doesn't do any of that. Yeah.
It's the same when I complain because I've used Blender too long now, and when I have to open up Maya, I'm always sitting there for the lag, 3 minutes that it takes, and I'm going, why the hell does this software take this long to open? Like it takes Blender 2 seconds. It's same with Lightwave though. Lightwave took like 2 seconds to open. Yeah. So, and now everything that Autodesk has purchased, even Motion Builder used to be Filmbox, remember? And that used to, you double click it, opens instantly. Now it's like Motion Builder. You double click it and you're sitting there. It's like, what are you doing? What is this software doing?
I know, man. I'm constantly complaining, like throughout the shows and podcasts I've done, like how I'm a 3D artist, right? So I'm relying on these 3D applications all the time. And how slow they are with progress, especially with we're not sponsored by Autodesk, so I'm okay with saying like, man, they just been slowing and lagging behind competition. Just I've seen like you talk about Modo being like an old school software. They've been getting a lot of 3D artists transferring. Silo is another program that people are really loving.
It's because Autodesk doesn't make software; they buy software.
Right.
So everything they own, they've purchased. Maya used to be Alias Wavefront. So that, and Filmbox, I can't remember the company, but that Motion Builder used to be Filmbox. What they do is very strategically, they purchase the software that's really powerful and they add it to their, the problem is they don't grow the software.
No, they purchase it. They either keep it stale or they get rid of it, like Mudbox or Softimage
or XSI, which Softimage, which had a huge following.
Yeah.
So it was really shocking to see them stop producing Softimage. And then what was the game engine that they bought in Shuttle? That was the same thing. Stingray. They called it Stingray. Right. And you could see the potential in that, though. You were like, oh man, they potentially one day this could be a player, but they don't write software. So I don't know. I think they just
kill competition.
I don't know what the answer is.
Yeah.
They're a big company. I'm sure they're doing fine.
They're doing fine. They can afford it. But like, this is what I'm saying. It gives way to Blender or smaller software. I hope they don't buy it.
And I'm not even sure they care. I think they're
okay.
Well, they can't buy Blender. It's open source.
It's open source.
I think those guys don't care that much. I think their money comes from the CAD software anyway.
Yeah.
I've heard that they
ArchViz,
they just don't.
Yeah. No, it makes sense.
Yeah, the actual stuff that costs thousands of dollars per seat. Well, Maya costs thousands of dollars, I guess.
Yeah.
The bigger studio, the bigger.
Yeah, and I guess it works well with that crowd since they like things not changing too much with their software. At least that industry, right? They're more they like being comfortable. Which is
I always thought also it's probably really hard to compete with, because 3D software is kind of the perfect open source software because it's modular, right? It's a renderer. That's one kind of piece of software plugged in. It's the materials, the compositor. This thing has a compositor and camera tracking, all kinds of crap built in, and all that can be written by a different group of people. And when you're talking about, God, there's probably like 10,000 people writing code for this thing.
It's really hard
because
to
it's hard to compete with that. They're contributing to it, and it's all free. Even the guy from Naughty Dog, he wrote a painting. he wrote into the painting program, because this also you can 3D paint. He wrote where you can 3D paint normal maps. So you can take brushes and use them as normals and paint. And that was kind of his kind of thank you to the Blender Foundation for having the software that he could access the source code to. Yeah, but it's wild.
Yeah. Well, it's one of the main reasons why anytime there is like a new innovation, how an open source program can, with their huge amount of community of people, can have such a fast turnaround and be like, oh, that looks cool, let's add that.
Right.
And then it becomes,
and they don't,
yeah.
And if it's hopefully it's all quality controlled, but it is cool to see like cutting edge stuff. But Unreal does the same thing, and those guys are super excited to release that's why you get fractions of releases, right? 4.2, 0.3 or whatever, because they've got something new and exciting to show you that they've gotten to work in real time. Last time I was there, they were working on like real time volumetric clouds and stuff like that, like stuff that you would think would be absolutely impossible. Really, really cool. But that's what they're excited about, right? They're just and they want to get that stuff out. And most of the time it works. Again, I think the game engine's kind of the same thing. It's you can compartmentalize all these things and they just work together.
So this project right here, you mentioned before it was like a team of 10, or like you worked with a group of people. Like, can you explain a little
I'd
bit
never done this
how that
before.
came about? Okay.
So I can't remember how it came about, honestly. I think I met somebody somewhere that mentioned that there was a Discord group for Blender. And when I got on there, they were talking about doing their next, they call it something like a challenge, some kind of challenge. And me being me, I just immediately started saying, I kind of, because they have no supervision. It's just, and rightfully so, it's a group of guys, they're just having fun. And they usually don't make stuff of this quality. That's usually like, a little bit simpler product. And I was like, man, this could be really cool, because within a month you could make all these assets part-time, mind you. We're just kind of playing around on the side. So I would jump in there and like redesign their stuff and give it back to them and have them work on it a little bit more than normal. But what's nice for those guys is they probably got a lot. Like, I didn't build this. I helped build it, but this guy could totally put this on his reel now and say, hey, I modeled this and baked it down. And otherwise that was going to be like a box with some crap on it. I don't know. And I'm not saying it was. I can't remember. I do know that I went in and like helped help bevel all this out and get the little details in there that things that I wanted to see, even like in the books. And I don't know, so we ended up making what I think is like a pretty good looking product here.
Looks awesome.
It was based on a piece of concept from an old adventure game that we were working with. But what's cool about all of this, everything you see here it's also open source. We built it to be open source. So it's, I think you can go to, I want to say blendswap.com. And you can download anything on here, any of this stuff. So if you need, I don't know, a hanging lamp or whatever those things are, then you can go grab this out of the set and use it completely free. It's, there's no license to it at all. I ended up reworking these because these say Paris. These are commercial stickers. So the version you'll get on BlendSwap will have like a hand painted stickers. Let's see if they're in here. No, there's still the old ones. So yeah, I hand painted some like wizard traveling stickers and redid this thing so it makes sure it was completely like commercial free. For somebody to be able to use. Yeah.
That's a professional.
So I don't get sued by that sticker company. Right.
So was this all done within a month? That's really?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Damn, dude. That's pretty damn good, man.
Yeah.
Part-timers.
It's pretty crazy, right?
Yeah, it's awesome. Did you guys get any like notoriety from this? Some featuring from Blender? I'm sure the
I don't
Blender
think anybody was. I don't even think anybody was looking for it. It's the strange thing. I don't know. I didn't. No,
We're gonna
we
change
didn't.
this.
And matter
This
of
should have
fact,
been the front page of
honestly,
Blender, dude. Like, come on. I know there's like a lot of hobbyists working on Blender, but come
I
on,
don't
you
even
guys are
think
like, this is
I did
professional
one
quality right here.
image from it,
Yeah.
and I don't even know what happened to that. Like we kind of showed it on Facebook, and people were like, "Oh, that's great," and then I didn't think much more about it. I just thought, how cool is it to have access to more, just more assets in anything you want to use? And I should get on there and kind of probably spearhead all of these things. The thing is, it's time consuming.
Yeah.
And I don't know, I don't really, I'm not getting paid or anything, so I don't know, other than just getting some cool assets.
Let's get some publicity behind this. All right, we're gonna change the things around. This is too good to not be on the front page of Blender, man. So we're about that hour actually. So this is a part of time where it might be a great opportunity to kind of give a shout out. I'm gonna hand the mic over to you. Any give attention to any organization, maybe Blender. Any word of advice? This is the best time to do it. So I'm gonna switch over to your full picture here. Go for it.
Yeah, man. I think the best way to support Blender right now is to join the Blender Foundation, which is I'm a member, and I think it's like $100 a year or $99 a year or something like that. And it gives you access. It's not just that you're giving money to these guys. You actually get access to their web page that has all kinds of things from HDRs, HDR images to assets, characters. See, they make all these open source movies, and all the sets and characters from those movies are all stored at the Blender Foundation on their website. So you have access to all that stuff. It's all rigged. It's ready to go. Yeah, it's a great way to support them, I think. I do mine. It feels like nothing, $100 a year to use a piece of software that makes me a living. So I have no problem with that. I don't even bat an eye. Matter of fact, I should do more for them. I don't know what else I could do, but I'm sure something.
Well,
the other funny thing, I didn't tell the story.
Go for it,
dude. So Mark Petit, Mark Petit is he's the president of the Unreal Engine. He actually called me on the phone like a few months ago, and he also used to be the president of Maya. I think he worked for, like, he was a big time guy for Autodesk. So he calls me on the phone one time, and it's just a few months ago, and was asking me all these questions about Blender. It was pretty surreal, and I ended up answering all these questions, and within it was just a few weeks ago, they announced this huge donation to the Blender Foundation. So I feel a little bit.
You should have got a percentage on that.
I might have helped Blender get some of this money, actually, because I had nothing but good things to say, right? And I also pointed, because he didn't realize how many people at the studio were using it. So I pointed out, like, talk to this guy, talk to this guy, talk to this guy. And so between me and those guys, I got a feeling we got Blender some jack. So, which was good. And I'm glad it happened, and I'm really glad that that Epic is behind Blender. I think that's really cool, and I can't wait to see what they're going to do with some of that money. In the future, I think it's spread out over years, so we'll be able to see what's going on.
I mean, the humility in me and yourself saying, like, it's just great that they got the grant, but a part of me is like, dude, where's my shout out to my man Tom over here helping them out, constantly making
they
great
might not
art
even know. I don't.
We're gonna change that fact. We're gonna change that fact starting today. All right, man. Well, thank you so much, Tom.
And I'll have to get the name of the guys that helped me out with this, because they deserve a ton of credit too. They did some amazing work.
Right.
So yeah.
So I'm gonna list all their names with this video when it does come out for everybody who are interested. We're gonna link this project. I'm gonna get some photographs from you too. This needs to be in the front page because, come on, man, it's Blender. People are learning. I know there's a lot of good artists on there, but this is professional quality here.
Cool. Well, thank you.
All right. Thank you, everybody. That is our show for this hour with Tom Wright. As always, you can follow us everywhere. And see you guys next week. See you, Tom.
Later, guys.